The illegitimacy rate among black Americans is close to 75%. And a lot of people will blame this on a legacy of discrimination, but it turns out in 1938, the illegitimacy rate was 11% among blacks. And matter of fact, among whites, it was 3% in 1938, and today among whites is around 30%. If you look at the breakdown the black family, and matter of fact, maybe breakdown is a poor term to use, the black family does not form in the first place. That is, only 30-some% of black kids live in two-parent families. Again, many people will blame that on a legacy of discrimination, but turns out in 1880s, the 75% of black kids lived in two-parent families. In New York in 1925, 85% of black kids lived in two-parent families. The kind of crime that we see in many black neighborhoods is entirely new. I grew up in the Richtown Housing Project in North Philadelphia, and we didn't go to bed to the sounds of gunshots. And many people, they did not lock their door until 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night when everybody was home. There was far greater civility in poor black neighborhoods at a time when black people were closer to slavery, only two or three generations out of slavery, and there were not the opportunities, and there's far greater discrimination against blacks as we find today. So what I'm arguing is that much of what we see has absolutely nothing to do with discrimination. If you look at, the fact of business, which is not very pleasant to talk about, if you ask the question, in what cities do black people are black people most insecure, receive the grossly poor education, and have other very, very poor living standards, they are in the very cities where a black is the mayor, a black is the chief of police, black is the superintendent of school, and the very cities where the administration has in those cities have been Democrat for half a century. So I'm not stating a causal relationship between blacks being in political control of these cities and the poor living conditions and the poor standards in school. But what I'm saying is that you can't blame it on discrimination. That is, the rotten education that black kids are receiving in Washington, D.C., no way in the world can you blame that on racial discrimination when the political mechanism in Washington, D.C. is black, unless you want to say that the black politicians are engaging in racial discrimination and oppressing their people. So I think that when you begin to try to solve problems, you have to identify the causes correctly. That is, for example, I could be a physician, and you come to me and you say you have a bad stomach ache. And I can say, well, your stomach ache is caused by your ingrown toenails. Well, if there's no relationship between your ingrown toenails and your stomach ache, I can treat your ingrown toenails all that want, and you're still going to have the stomach ache. And the same thing with trying to help people out. That is, if you have to identify the causes of their problems correctly. And if you just say, well, look, black problems are caused by a legacy of discrimination and a legacy of slavery and discrimination, well, you can work on that all you want, and the black problems are going to persist.
Is the welfare system intrinsically intended to keep poor people, mainly of color, in poverty?
I don't think that is intrinsically intended. I don't think that's the intention. I think that the intention for well-intended people, I think, is to help people. But I think that when you look at the intentions of programs, when you look at programs, you should ignore their intentions and ask, what is the effect? And I think that the effect of welfare has been devastating for black Americans. The kind of things you see among black Americans today are entirely new, as I said earlier. And there's no more material poverty in the United States There's no more material poverty. We don't have anything like you see in Bangladesh and Afghanistan and all these other poor countries. What we have in our country is poverty of the spirit. That is where people have become dependent on government programs, and they're not self-sufficient. That's the kind of poverty that we have today.
In what ways do you believe black Americans would be better off if no welfare state had ever been instituted?
Well, I think that not only black Americans, but Americans in general, I think that Americans in general they'd be more independent. That is, see, I think one of the things we have to recognize, and any economist, I believe, whether he's liberal or conservative or free market, he will tell you that if you tax something, you're going to get less of it, and if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. And what we've been doing is subsidizing slovenly behavior. I mean, you see, like the duration of unemployment has, I think, almost doubled since the 1940s. And one of the reasons why the duration of unemployment has doubled is because of unemployment compensation, whereby people can pick and choose. They can say, oh, I'm not going to take this hamburger flipper job. I'm going to wait for something better to come along. But if not accepting that job meant starvation, then they would not make such a decision. I think that that it creates a dependence mentality. To give you an example of this, my wife has a huge family, as I suggested that she was the youngest of 10 children. And she has a huge family. And one time we were over their house, and two of her nieces were arguing about money. And one said, "I'll pay you. I'll give you damn money when I get paid." And she was referring to going to the mailbox picking up a welfare check. I mean, the idea that a welfare check is payment. One of the tragic things about the crime problem in the many black neighborhoods is that 51 or 2% of homicide victims in the United States are black. And it turns out that somewhere around 94, 95% of them are murdered by another black. And so if you focus attention on what police are doing or what white people are doing, you will not deal with the problem of black lives being destroyed on the streets because most of them are done by murdered by blacks.
For the dear professor, this is what I'd like to ask him about: the three-fifths clause, and also the founding fathers who were slaveholders, because he keeps talking about the founding fathers. If it just turned on them, he would still be in slavery.
I think that the three-fifths clause that people talk about, the blacks being seen as three-fifths of a person, it turned out that during the 1787 convention in Philadelphia, it turned out that slaves were 40% of the population of the southern states. The southern states wanted to count each person, each slave, as one vote. The northern delegates to the convention, they didn't think that slaves should be counted at all in terms of the apportionment for the House of Representatives. And so the concession they made was to make blacks count, the slaves count as three-fifths of a person for the purposes of apportionment to the House of Representatives. Now, the caller, I don't know whether he would want this, would he argue on the side of the southern states to count each black as one vote, which if they were counted as one vote, it would give the southern states far greater power in the United States Congress. Now, many of the founders they did not want. They were against slavery, but they did not. They felt that if they had abolished slavery during the convention, then there would not have been a union. And so one has to ask the question, would blacks have been better off if the North went their way and the South went their way, and there was not a union created between, we did not become a United States? I don't think so. I would disagree that blacks would have been better off under those conditions. And matter of fact, I think it was Wilson, one of the delegates, I believe, from New Jersey. He said something. At least we've outlawed slavery, the slave trade, by 1808, and that might be a very good start for outlawing altogether. Now, in terms of the founders' vision of slavery, I have many, many quotations from the founders, including George Washington, James Madison, George Mason, Thomas Jefferson, et cetera, that condemn the idea of slavery. But I think that there's one thing that we have to recognize, and again, this is not giving any moral sanction to slavery, is that throughout mankind's history, slavery has been the normal state of affairs. And it turns out that blacks were the last people to be enslaved. That is, matter of fact, the term slave comes from it's a reference to the Slavic people. That is, Slavs were among some of the first slaves. And matter of fact, white Americans were enslaved, and that's why Jefferson sent troops to Tripoli to free American slaves that were enslaved by some of the northern African countries. And so I think that the unique thing about slavery in the United States and slavery in the United States is that, or in the Western world, I should say, is that Great Britain and United States were the two countries that went to the greatest pains to eliminate slavery. That is, Great Britain banned the slave trade. Just the sight of the Union Jack on the high seas, that kind of ended the trade of slavery. And then Americans, we fought a very, very costly war. Of 600,000 Americans died, and part of the effort was to eliminate slavery. So I think there's two things we have to recognize. Slavery was the normal state of affairs with mankind, and again, I'm not giving any sanction to it, but it was a normal state of affairs among mankind. But the fact of business is that United States and Great Britain did the most to end that abusive and ugly institution.